Joining us from Melbourne also is James Paterson, Liberal Senator, and Tim Watts, Labor MP, for our poly panel. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. Now, one of the big conversations this morning is around this luxury car tax. $675 million a year raised from cars, over $90,000. It was supposed to protect local industries. With Holden going, should this tax go, James Paterson?
Annalise, I'd like to see the luxury car tax removed when the budget allows it. But even more importantly, actually, is the remaining 5% tariff on imported cars from any country that we don't have a free trade agreement with. That actually affects quite a large number of car makers and therefore customers here in Australia. Both of these policies were implemented a long time ago in an effort, a failed effort, as it turns out, to protect local manufacturing, which has long since ceased to exist. Now we've got the brand of Holden also departing. I think it's just another reminder that the best thing we could do is make cars more affordable for Australians, make them more efficient, make them better quality, and give them more choice with cheaper cars.
What does that mean when the budget allows it?
Well, the priority at the moment is getting the budget back to surplus, taking into account the very difficult situation we've had this financial year with the bushfires, the drought and now the coronavirus. There's a lot of pressure on the budget, and I'm certainly not advocating anything in the short term that would make it even harder to reach a budget surplus, because there is a cost to removing taxes like this. But I think it should be the ambition, certainly over the medium term, when the budget is in hopefully a stronger state, that we can remove these taxes and deliver cheaper cars and better choice for Australians.
Tim Watts, do you agree?
Well, all of our policies have been under review since the election, but I can't say this is something that we've been giving any particular special consideration to. I mean, all of this really just highlights the complete absence of any economic plan from the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government. I mean, 6 years ago, this mob dared the auto and manufacturing industry to leave Australia. They withdrew government support for the industry, and in my electorate, that cost 2,500 jobs. Real families, not a political debating point. My constituents, my voters, who lost their jobs as a result of the actions of the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government. And we fast forward down the track, and now we're still discussing the consequences of that. There's no plan, no strategy. They have no idea what they're doing, and they're just making it up as they go.
Just quickly on that, Annalise, I think it's worth pointing out for viewers that Mitsubishi and Ford announced the end of their manufacturing in Australia under the previous Labor government in the Rudd-Gillard years. Yes, it's true, Holden and Toyota departed under the Abbott government, but I don't think you can blame Tony Abbott or Joe Hockey for Mitsubishi or Ford's departure.
No Labor treasurer ever stood up in the Parliament and dared the employers of thousands of Australians to leave this country. It was a disgrace, and it was the direct trigger for the 2,500 jobs being lost in my electorate. Toyota manufacturing plant in Altona would still be operating today if it wasn't for the actions of the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government.
No Liberal Treasurer did that either. What the Liberal government wisely did is recognising that Ford and Mitsubishi had already departed under the Labor government, even with generous taxpayer subsidies on the table. What the Liberal government at the time recognised is that ongoing subsidies wasn't going to keep any more manufacturing here in Australia. It was just going to make it more expensive for taxpayers.
But poor old James, he's just learning from his leader,
there?
Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister. He can't be straight about this issue. This is a very clear issue. Government acted, there were consequences, they won't be responsible.
What action did the Gillard and Rudd governments take to cause Mitsubishi and Ford to leave then, Tim?
James, I'm talking about the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government withdrawing government support for the auto industry in Australia, and as a direct consequence, Toyota leaving the country.
So why did Mitsubishi and why did Ford leave the country then?
Well, if we can talk about the luxury car tax, though, because that is the question today. The taxpayers have already forked out millions of dollars subsidising this industry, as both of you have acknowledged. Tim Watts, should Labor be taking on this stance? You've said that they're under review, but you can personally turn your mind to it now. Should this luxury car tax go?
Like I say, all of our policies are under review, but it's not a particular priority for us.
$675 million of taxpayer money isn't a priority for you?
This policy issue is an issue that's created by the actions of the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government. We're asking them to come up with an economic plan here. I mean, what we're seeing here today is this issue has arisen because of the policy freelancing of Matt Canavan, the Queensland Senator, who's enjoying his time on the backbench and he's kicking off these policy debates. James desperately doesn't want to talk about it because he knows that the budget surplus that Scott Morrison promised us that we already had is now under grave threat as a result of their mismanagement of the economy. I'd like to see the government come up with a plan, not just keep making it up as they go along, not have you know, the tail of the backbench and the Queensland LNP wagging the dog of the government. I mean, it's time for economic policymakers in the Morrison government to show some leadership, to come up with a plan and say what they are going to do for the Australian economy.
If we could move on to underpayment, it seems to be one scandal after another at the moment. Target's the latest to admit to underpaying by $9 million. We had Coles yesterday. The ABC's been caught up in underpayment scandals. So we had Woolworths as well. James Paterson, why is this issue getting so out of control?
Well, it's completely unacceptable, Annalise, particularly for these large businesses and large organisations that have enormous HR departments, expensive law firms on a charge to be underpaying their workers. I mean, you're right, it includes the ABC, it includes Coles and Woolworths. It also includes Maurice Blackburn, a Labor law firm which sues other people for underpayments. It includes a charity like Red Cross. There's no excuse for these large companies not to be paying the right amount to their workers. We've got a little bit more sympathy for a small business who doesn't have those resources, but big businesses just have no excuse at all.
Tim Watts, do you think the government could be doing more in this space to stop wage theft?
Well, it's notable that James says just then that there's no excuse for wage theft, and I completely agree with this. This is one of the great scandals in Australia of the last 7 years under the Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government. Wage theft has become endemic in this country, in services industries. It is becoming close to the norm, frankly. But what has this government done about it? Nothing. Nothing. It has stood by why a criminal scandal has proliferated across the country, and it's refused to act. And there is no more bread and butter issue than this. This is directly taking money out of the back pocket of Australians, money that should be going into the economy. We wonder why the retail sector is so weak in this economy. We wonder why wages growth is so weak in this economy. And yet there is a roll gold moral scandal of employers taking money out of the back pocket of working Australians that's completely failed to be addressed by the Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government over the last 7 years.
James Paterson, could the government be doing more to stop this?
Well, Christian Porter is right now reviewing these laws, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some strong changes soon. But the reality is it's already unlawful to pay your workers, and these companies are already breaking the law. So maybe there need to be stronger penalties for them. I'm very happy to look at that, and the government's considering that. But there's no excuse for not complying with the law as it is today. I think it's also worth pointing out that many of these large retail businesses that have been underpaying their workers are highly unionised businesses, and in particular the STA union, one of the largest unions in the country, oversees these workplaces. What have they been doing? Why has it taken them so long to identify these? And in some cases, they haven't even identified them at all. It's been the businesses that have done so. Is it because the SDA has a cosy relationship with some of these large businesses and sweetheart deals that we saw exposed in the Trade Union Royal Commission?
I knew the Morrison government hated unions, but this is surely a first. Blaming the trade union movement for employer wage theft. I mean, these people have left planet Earth, they've departed. This is just bizarro world stuff. I mean, get with the program, James. The Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government has presided over this scandal that has taken over the nation, a moral scandal, a legal scandal, and done nothing. And now their excuse is to blame the trade union movement. I mean, come off it.
What about Labor law firms like Maurice Blackburn, Tim? They promised to sue other people for underpaying their workers, and they themselves underpaid their workers.
Spin, spin, spin. When are you going to act?
It's truthful.
When are you going to act?
Just finally, let's move on to superannuation. Anthony Albanese is giving a speech later today where we know he's going to say that there is a group of people within the coalition who are just anti-super altogether, let alone anti-raising the compulsory contributions up to 12%. James Paterson, is that right? Is there a group within the coalition that just want to see super go?
I support compulsory superannuation, but like the Reserve Bank of Australia, the Productivity Commission, the Parliamentary Budget Office, ACOS, every independent economist that's ever looked at this, and the Grattan Institute, I am sceptical about increasing the superannuation guarantee to 12% because they have all identified from good, solid, factual economic evidence that that will come at the expense of people's take-home wages. There was a really interesting study from ANU that showed that low-income workers in particular would be hit hard by that, and high-income workers who don't need it would just have a more generous retirement. So I'm very sceptical about the need to do that.
Tim Watts, what do you make of that argument that in an environment where wages aren't growing as fast as they should be, why are we getting workers to put more money away for later when they could have a better quality of life now?
Well, superannuation was never supposed to be a safety net. It was always about providing some dignity in retirement for working Australians, providing a structure so that when Australians who had done the hard yards, who put in the work through their career, retired, that they would get a quality of life that befitted the wealthy country that we are in. Working Australians that I talk to in electorates like mine are strong supporters of superannuation. They really, really value it. They look forward to that quality of life that they can get in retirement through investing in superannuation. So I don't have a problem with it. I think that the 12% is a good threshold to get to. It'll ensure that more Australians are able to retire with that quality of life that they deserve after a hard-working career.
Well, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, Senator James Paterson and Labor MP Tim Watts.